Chapter 12. Choosing Family. By the end of that long day, I hadn't found a job. Our money was gone, and we weren't any richer except for the raincoat and bananas and bag of beads that tea shop auntie had given us. Still, I felt thankful. Thankful we had at least that much. Most of all, thankful that you were following me without a fuss with Cootie at your heels. Smart, independent Cootie, who'd scampered off to eat scraps out of every open, overflowing garbage can we'd seen. We wouldn't have to worry about feeding him. Arul and Muthu returned as we were trying to tie our raincoat to a steel rod that was poking out of the wall of the bridge to make a roof. Arms outstretched, you ran toward the boys. The raincoat flapped in the wind and started flying about the bridge. You squealed with excitement as I zigzagged for the raincoat, dodging the holes in the bridge. Cootie yipped and joined in the chase. "Cloth bird!" Muthu yelled as he helped me catch it. "Nice save," Arul clapped, "but that's not big enough for a roof." "What do you know?" I huffed. "We don't need you telling us how to build a shelter." "Too bad, 'cause I got a spare tarp for you. A nice big one." "Now you tell me," after I almost twisted my ankle hopping all over the bridge. "You could thank me, you know," he said. "I could," I agreed. Arul grinned. I grinned back. "Well, maybe you'll want to thank me after we have some dinner." We spread the raincoat on the ground and sat cross-legged in a circle around it. Arul set their food 4 crisp merkus wrapped in paper. My mouth watered, seeing the beige spirals made of spicy lentil flour. I added the bananas that remained from the bunch that tea shop auntie had given us. Arul pressed his palms together and said a prayer I'd never heard before. It sounded like Our Father, O-R-T, Narayan, something, something, all in English, not Tamil, like Mama's prayers. Then we split the food up evenly, almost. Arul insisted he wasn't hungry. He gave me his fruit to save for you for the next morning. Ashamed that I was too selfish and hungry to be so noble, I downed my fair share. After dinner, Arul helped us build our shelter. We tied the edge of the new tarp to the rods poking out of the wall of the bridge right alongside their tarp. You and Muthu helped us stretch the other end of the tarp from the wall to the ground and weigh down the bottom edge with stones to make a sloped roof. We hung our towel between the two sloped tarp roofs like a wall. I spread out our sheet and bunched up the raincoat for you as a pillow. "Sleep well in your new home," Arul said. We crawled into our tent and took the book Parvati teacher had given me and strained my eyes trying to read in the semi-darkness, but I could hardly make out the words. I put the book away and thought of how kind she had been to us. "When we grow up, I want to be a teacher," I told you. This is a dream that had flitted through my mind before. Voicing it for the first time made my dream feel more solid. But it also made me worry if, by running away, I'd pushed it further out of my reach. "You think I can be a teacher someday?" Subbu and Parvati teacher moved to cities so their lives could get better, right? Like us. "Story," you demanded. I sighed. I didn't want Arul hearing my story and thinking it was silly, so I started whispering as I'd done the night before. "Loud," you commanded. "Palace, peacock." Okay. I raised my voice a little and saw Muthu's shadow as he crept next to the towel dividing the tents. When I was done, you demanded, "Again!" I was about to protest when Muthu's voice floated through the thin barrier between us. "Yes, Akka, please, one more time." His words made my throat seize up, and it was a few moments before I could speak again. He'd called me Akka, older sister. He'd made me family. Chapter 13. Work and Pray. That morning, after we'd combed our hair, I offered our comb to the boys. "If you'd like," I said hesitantly, not wanting to offend them, "you can use this." Muthu snickered. "Next, you're trying to make us iron our clothes." "Thanks." Arul stuck the comb in his tangled hair and yanked. "Months since I did this." "Months? Really?" Muthu said. Akka would never have guessed that just by looking at your hair, boss. The comb snapped in two. Tack! You imitated the sound of the comb breaking and clapped your hands. Tack, tack, tack. Sorry, Arul said, tugging the piece left in his hair. It stuck up at a jaunty angle, refusing to come out. Coffee. Why are you sorry, boss? Muthu pealed with laughter. You made 2 combs out of their one. Never mind, I said. Here, let me help. I pulled the stubborn piece of comb along with a chunk of Arul's hair. He yelped and rubbed his head, but continued apologizing. I feel bad. Is there anything I can do to make it up to you? There's nothing you can do, I said. You can promise to eat. There is something you can do, I said. You can promise to eat your share of food every night. What do you care how much I eat? Arul asked. I don't care. It's just that if you eat your fair share, then I won't have to feel guilty about doing it either. You made me feel like a greedy pig last night. Arul grinned. It's silly to skip meals, I said. How are you going to live a nice long life if you don't eat properly? What's the point of living longer? Well, what's the point of dying sooner? I don't mind going off to meet our Father who art in heaven as soon as I can. Our Father who art in heaven? Oh, you said that last night. Your father is dead. Yes, but I wasn't praying to my Father, he said. I was praying to God. He's called our Father. God's our mother, too. Only if you're Hindu, he said. Hindus have 1,000,000 names for God, but they're all wrong because Hindus worship the wrong gods. I never heard anyone say there's a right name or wrong name, let alone a right God or a wrong God, I said. Anyway, it doesn't matter to me because I don't pray. You really never pray? Arul looked horrified. Even the wrong gods are better than no God. My mother must have prayed 1,000,000 times for our father to be better to us, but he only got worse. He always hit her, and then one night beat us, so we ran away. I cast a glance at you, wondering if it would upset you to hear me talking about Appa, but you and Muthu were busy combing Kuti scanty fur with one of the pieces of comb. What about you? My family died, Arul said. I'm so sorry, I told him. Don't worry. Christians go to heaven when they die. What do Christians do when they're alive? I said, sensing that he didn't want to dwell on the subject of his family's death. I had a vague idea that being Christian had something to do with worshiping Yesu, a god who wore a crown of thorns. Arul started explaining all about Yesu and about doing what a book called the Bible says to do. Muthu joined us when Arul was telling me that Yesu said that if someone whacks you on the cheek, you should show them the other cheek. And if you do the other things Yesu says, Muthu added, you sprout wings when you go to heaven, and you can zoom around like an airplane. You're a Christian too? I asked Muthu. I don't know, Muthu scratched his chin. You are, Arul said. You repeated those words I told you. Remember? Yes, Muthu said, but those are just words, and you told me to say them, boss, so I said them. But there's lots I don't really understand. Like what? Arul demanded. Like showing the other cheek thing, and why Yesu didn't fight the bad guys, Muthu continued. He had 12 in his gang. Not a gang, Arul said. Followers. Gangs follow the boss, Muthu argued, so gangs are followers. Yesu had apostles, Arul corrected him, teachers who spread his word. Stop talking nonsense, Muthu. You should know better. Okay, boss. I'll just turn around and show the other side. Muthu whipped about and wiggled his bottom at us. Arul looked at the sky and moaned about how he didn't want our souls to burn in hell until eternity. If I hadn't been laughing so hard, I'd have asked Arul how eternity could have an end. We're running late, Muthu glanced at his imaginary wristwatch. Need to get to the office, boss. Want to come with us? Arul asked as he gathered the sacks and sticks they'd been carrying on the first day that we met. Yes, thanks. We really need a job, I said. Where do you work? We're adventurers, Muthu said. We climb mountains every day. Right, boss? Right, Arul said. although some days we swim across rivers instead. What do I need to bring? I said. Don't worry, we'll find you what you need, Arul said. Ruku will bring beads. You patted the bead bag. Good idea. He grinned at you. Good, you agreed. Cootie trotted along as we followed Arul across the bridge to the side we hadn't explored yet. It led to a crowded street where cars honked and bicycle bells trilled and motorbikes and auto rickshaws spewed trails of smoke. A van lurched by with school children in uniform hanging out the windows. One day, we'll go to school again, Ruku, I said, just like those kids. School, Muthu guffawed, like I'd been joking. You actually like school? Not exactly, I admitted, thinking of the kids who teased us and the teachers who ignored us. Not all the time, but there was one teacher I loved, and she said, I paused, thinking of all the wonderful things she said about my imagination, how smart I was, how she'd encouraged both of us. I realized the biggest gift she'd given me wasn't the book. It was something else. She believed in me and Ruku. Believe what? Muthu said. She said, if we work hard, I tried adopting Parvati teacher's persuasive tone. We can do anything when we grow up. I used to go to school. When I lived in my village, Arul sounded wistful. I had a great teacher too. Don't sound so sad, boss, Muthu said. We can do anything we want now, even though we aren't going to school. In fact, we can do anything we feel because we don't have any school teacher telling us what to do. We turned onto the street full of wooden stalls. At one stall, flies swarmed up from the gutter into the skinned carcasses of goats. You held your nose. Think that's a bad smell? Muthu cackled. Wait till you get where we're going. I couldn't imagine what could be worse. I remembered reading an article about a man who'd cleaned sewers on an oily bit of newspaper which Appa had wrapped pakoras to surprise us with one day on one of his good days. Surely we weren't going to clean sewers. Finally, we stopped in front of a shack that had a peeling sign above the door. Victory Waste Mart. Cootie should wait outside, Arul said. Sit. You and Cootie and Muthu sat on the steps while I ducked into the shack after Arul. Towers of junk, paper, plastic, glass, and metal were stacked everywhere. A man was holding up a pair of rusty scales, weighing some cardboard. One sack, please, Arul asked. The man's eyes fell on me. They were mean, like a rogue elephant's. What's your name, pretty girl? The man asked. I pretended I hadn't heard, figuring the less he knew about us, the better. You won't tell me your name, but you want my help? Viji, I mumbled. New to the city? Where do you live? Not sure, I said. He motioned toward a pile of crumpled jute sacks lying in a corner. I took one, and Arul picked out a stick. Thank you, sir, Arul called over his shoulder. We stepped out of the cluttered shack into the dazzling sunshine. Arul shot me a concerned look. You probably want to wait outside with Ruku and Cootie from now on. Yes, I said, grateful he'd understood that the waste man scared me. We cut through an empty park, past some teetering apartment buildings that at least offered some shade from the blazing sun. Huge posters, as tall as we were, advertising the latest movies, were plastered on the walls. We followed Arul to a flat open field where there was no escape from the sunshine. Gee, you wrinkled your nose. Not far away was the largest garbage heap I'd ever seen. Mounds and mounds of junk and waste stretched out like a mountain range. The fragrance of wilted jasmine flowers mingled with the smell of goat droppings and every other bad smell imaginable. Welcome to the Himalayas of rubbish, Muthu said with a dramatic flourish. Chapter 14, Climbing the Himalayas. You marched a few feet away from us and away from the dump and stood with your hands on your hips. Cootie stayed by your side. Sorry, Ruku, I said. We have to stay. No, Viji, you said in a reasonable tone. Go. We don't have a choice, believe me. I don't love it here. You pinched your nostrils shut. It's not the nicest place, but it's only so we can stay together, Ruku. You cocked your head. If I don't work here and earn money, we'll have to run right back to Appa. Understand? Appa hit Fiji, you said slowly. Appa hit Amma. My throat felt tight. You hadn't said anything about how he'd hit you. Fiji and Ruku together. You came over and patted my cheek. Ruku will make necklaces, you announced. I hugged you tight. Where's Ruku going to sit? Muthu said. My eyes darted from one mound to another, wondering what to do, but you solved the problem yourself. You found a plastic bucket to sit on under the shade of a thorny acacia tree, about as far from the rubbish range as you could go while staying within sight. You weren't as sheltered from the sun as I'd have liked. There was nothing we could do about that. You opened your bag and pulled out a long piece of string and knotted the end with the beads so the rest wouldn't fall off. You worked quietly, your fingers sifting through the beads, searching for another that matched. I had to start working too. What do I do? I hitched up my skirt as high as I could. Search! Muthu prodded a broken bottle at the base of a mound. For treasure, like this. Glass or metal scraps are best. The Waysmart man will even buy cardboard and cloth if they're not too tattered. Hesitantly, I prodded the mound closest to me. Nestling between a rusty can and a broken bottle was the carcass of a rat. Nausea rippled through me, but I couldn't give up before I started. I tried to pick up the bottle with my stick, and it slid deeper into the rubbish. The Waysmart man plays nicely for glass and metal, so we can't let it go. Arul grabbed the bottle with his bare hands and dropped it into my sack. But this, he jabbed at an empty juice carton and sent it tumbling further down into the rubbish, is worthless. Thanks, sorry. Don't worry, you'll be an expert in no time. I didn't say, I don't want to become an expert rag picker. I want to become a teacher. With an effort, I swallowed my words and the bile that had risen in my throat and stepped further into the mound. This rubbish heap seemed to come alive as I walked through it, sucking at my slippers like a hungry beast. My feet sank into the slimy mess. I lost sight of my toes. Flies swarmed around my ankles. Shuffle along, slowly, like you're wading through a river, Arul advised. He made it sound easy, but it wasn't. I squelched as long as best I could, making slow progress. I speared a damped rag and shook it into my sack. But when I spotted a bottle half filled with sour milk, I had to reach for it with my bare hands. I wanted to run away screaming. The only thing that kept me going was how peaceful you looked when I glanced back at you, sitting cross-legged, making another bead necklace with Cootie, alert and attentive next to you. And Arul must have realized what a slog it was for me, because every now and then he called out, "Nice work!" We worked for so long with the sun beating down on our skin that my head started to hammer with pain, and it was a mercy when Arul finally said, "Enough, let's stop." My spirit sank even deeper when I compared their loot with mine. I'm useless. I haven't got half as much as either of you. Don't worry. Arul peered into my sack. Lots of good stuff in there. We have more, but not worth as much. You'll see. Other than you, no one had ever shown me such loyalty. Even half empty, my sack was heavier than anything I'd carried before, and with you humming softly as you put away your beads and our two new friends beaming at me like my sack was filled with precious gems, I shouldered my burden without complaint, my back straight, my steps light.